Hello everyone and welcome to Very Cold Lasagna. I'm your host, Dylan Lasagna, and this is episode number 269 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all your filthy casual takes on the world of sports for you casual fans out there like you and me. In this episode, we're going to be talking about my NFL team, the San Francisco 49ers, and check in to see how they're doing so far in their 2025 offseason, 1 week out from the 2025 NFL draft. So this is kind of like a post-draft check-in on my San Francisco 49ers. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here in this episode here today on the podcast. But before we get started with this episode here today, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Make sure you follow Very Cold Lasagna on social media at Very Cold Lasagna. And make sure to listen to the podcast wherever you get them, whether it's on Apple or Spotify. And watch the show on YouTube. And hit that subscribe button if you're not already. What are you waiting for? And leave your comments down below with your takes on the topic at hand. That being your thoughts, your opinions, and whether you like the moves that the Niners are making so far in this offseason. And as always, share this with your friends, share this with your neighbors, share this podcast with whoever's around you, whether it's at work or school. Share the good, the bad, the ugly about this filthy casual sports podcast entitled Very Cold Lasagna. And yeah, we're just how many months away from the start of the 49ers regular season? 4 months. 4 months away from the overall start of the NFL season and the start of my Niners regular season. But if you want to look back even further, 3 months away from the preseason. And man, this year's going by so fast that in the blink of an eye, football will be back very shortly. But we're not here to talk about preseason or even regular season just yet. We still have some offseason checkups to look at, and that includes my team, the San Francisco 49ers, as we take a look at them. We take a look at how my 49ers are doing in 1 week out, one week removed from the NFL draft. So pretty much it's still pretty sparse in the offseason when it comes to any NFL team, but I want to do this this topic because, well, it's been a while since I've actually talked about my 49ers, since my season recap of them back in January. And aside from the Filthy Casuals guide, briefly mentioning them and briefly talking about them when it came to free agency. But I haven't dedicated an episode, dedicated any sort of video or anything regarding my 49ers. So I want to do a little checkup on them, see how they're doing so far in this offseason. So to pretty much recap, to pretty much summarize what I wanted to see from them in this offseason. So just to briefly recap how things were going into it, they finished 6-11 from their 2024 injury-riddled and underperforming campaign. And they were pretty much going to be undergoing a roster turnover. At the time, I didn't really know if it was going to be a pretty much retooling or a massive turnover because they had a lot of underperforming and aging players from their prior years, their Super Bowl / playoff years in the previous times. So yeah, it turned out it was going to be a little bit more than I initially thought, but we'll talk about it when we get there. So the Niners going into the offseason, they had around $60 million in cap space. And yeah, that was back in January though. That was back in January. And somehow, some way, that number decreased to around $40 million right before free agency. I had no idea how that number drastically decreased by over 20 million, but maybe it had to do with a dead cap release or a trade that decreased that cap space. But yeah, that was confusing to me. How they lost around 20 million in money that can be spent in free agency. So yeah, that really confused the heck out of me. So they did have 11 total draft picks recently in the draft, including the 11th overall pick. So they had plenty to work with in this most recent draft. Some of the key free agents heading into free agency, when we talked about it back in January, included a linebacker Drake Greenlaw, safety Talanoa Hufanga, the offensive guard Aaron Banks, running back Jordan Mason, who was a restricted free agent, by the way, and cornerback Charvarius Ward. So a couple names that they had to consider re-signing out of this list. There were a lot more that the Niners had to consider either re-signing or just let them go. Just let them go on their merry way. And then looking at my initial team needs for the Niners back when I talked about them in January and what they really needed to improve on for this team, mainly the biggest concern was the offensive line. Because, well, when you look at specific areas like right tackle with, what's his name? Not Jake Brendel. It was the right tackle that shall not be named. The right tackle that shall not be named. Center, though, which is held by Jake Brendel. And left guard, which was left unfulfilled because of the unrestricted free agent Aaron Banks. Those three positions were some of the worst in the NFL. They were completely beat, and that led to Brock Purdy having to scramble a lot and getting hit a lot at those specific spots. So offensive line was a major need in this ongoing offseason. They also had to replace Nick Sorensen, the defensive coordinator for last season. He was fired. And they also had to replace Brian Schneider, who was also fired. That's the special teams coordinator. So they both got fired for their underwhelming performances this past season, and rightfully so. They also had to make a decision on whether to offload some underperforming and older players, like I alluded to earlier, like Deebo Samuel, Javon Hargrave, etc., etc. So some decisions that had to be made for the players that were offered and given big fat contracts, but were not performing to expectations, and they were also getting older, especially on the wrong side of 30. They also had to consider bringing in competition for the kicker, the second-year kicker Jake Moody, because throughout last year, he was not exactly performing well. In fairness, he did have an injury, but once he was healthy, he wasn't exactly great. They also had to address the other side of the trenches, which was the interior defensive line, and the defensive line as a whole, because Nick Bosa really needs some help. And then because of the Brandon Ayuk ACL, MCL injury, he also needed a cheap downfield receiver to replace / complement him in the interim. So they needed a lot. They needed a lot if they want to stay in the pack for realistically a playoff berth at best going into 2025. So those were my main needs for the 49ers. And, well, whether they could, quote unquote, finally finish the story with a decent schedule, what should at least feel like a decent schedule with a decent slate of teams in this upcoming season. But, well, that remains to be seen. Would the Niners actually be able to put together a decent offseason full of decent success? Well, let's see what the Niners actually have done so far in this offseason. They did at least do a few things right. They indeed replaced Nick Sorensen and Brian Schneider, and they actually got some relatively good hires. They brought back familiar face Robert Saleh. It took a long while to actually get Robert Saleh back, because he was doing head coach interviews, and for whatever reason, the Niners were just waiting around. They didn't interview anybody else. But before they were forced to, practically, by the NFL, because they were just basically waiting around for Robert Saleh to, finish up head coaching interviews before ultimately taking the defensive coordinator job. I'm just like, the Niners, shouldn't they be considering, in case of emergency option, if Robert Saleh did indeed consider a head coaching position? Like, there should always at least be one or two alternatives just in case something didn't work out. But hey, we got the guy we wanted, and it's the safe option, which was Robert Saleh. So I'm glad that he's back. He should be a big help for a defense that has been sluggish. It's been sluggish for the last 2 years with Nick Sorensen, and then they had, I don't even remember the name from from 2 years prior. But anyway, the one that kind of helped us in 2023, but not really. So on special teams, you had Brant Boyer. Not much is known for us filthy casuals, but Brant Boyer, he was a part of the Jets even before Robert Saleh became the head coach. So he joins him in a 2-for-1 deal. And at one point, he did indeed have the second best special teams unit. I believe it was in 2021. So hopefully Brant Boyer will have some similar success in turning around one of the worst special teams units in the NFL, which is the 49ers. So I hope Brant Boyer will be able to fix this side of the ball. So many of the older and underperforming players were indeed offloaded. So like Javon Hargrave was released a month before free agency, which was made official at free agency. Deebo Samuel was traded to Washington for a 5th-round pick. Sadly, couldn't get more than that. But that was the important thing, that Deebo was traded to Washington. I mean, it was only a matter of time, unfortunately. I mean, once he dropped that ball in a key critical game against the Rams on a Thursday night, yeah, it was pretty much over. It was pretty much over for Deebo's time in San Francisco. I mean, he did so much for us, but at the same time, this last season in 2024, you knew it was over for there. Another not so notable player, I mean, under the radar player, was long snapper Tabor Pepper. He was also released. He was another longtime player. And then you had another bunch of variety of players from their Super Bowl runs. They left in free agency, like Charvarius Ward, which was an understandable one because he said multiple times he wanted a fresh start for understandable reasons that I won't get into. Another surprising one, though, was Dre Greenlaw. He unfortunately did not resign, which sucked. And there's a variety of reports out there from various beat writers that the Niners made an attempt at the last minute, which is pretty disrespectful to Greenlaw and pretty much to Niner fans out there. They made a last minute attempt to sign Dre Greenlaw after he had already signed to Denver. Really? For a player that, was one of the heart and souls of the defense next to Fred Warner, that's really how you repay him. And I get it. He's coming off the torn Achilles, but really, you can't even try to make an attempt to sign him. Really? They also let go Talanoa Hufanga, and they also let go Aaron Banks. They kind of underperformed last year, and they also came with their own injury concerns. But the caveat is that the Niners planned on letting most of them go anyway, due to either their injury history or, in the case of Ward, a fresh start. So there's that. There also was a defensive overhaul, which is another positive, but at the same time also a negative. Like I mentioned with Dre Greenlaw, they let him go, which was unfortunate, but they did manage to find a replacement for him. I'll get to that in a little bit. So both free agency and the draft saw a significant overhaul in the defense in order to help out Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, and Diamador Lenore. Your three key pieces in that defense. So you're pretty much seeing a relatively fresh and kind of younger defense. So free agency was mainly just depth pieces. And yeah, that's pretty much mostly what free agency was for this 49ers team. It was mainly just kind of just depth pieces, like, rental pieces for the most part. Such as like safeties, Richie Grant, Jason Pinnock of the Falcons and the Giants respectively. And then you got corner Trey Brown from the Seahawks. A lot of bust backup players. But the draft was more where the Niners really did their dirty work. The draft saw more potential from a variety of players, like first round pick edge rusher Mikael Williams from Georgia. So Mikael Williams, he's still pretty raw, but he has a lot of potential. I'll talk more about these players in my scouting of them later on in this episode. You also got defensive tackle Alfred Collins, linebacker Nick Martin, corner Upton Stout, and defensive tackle CJ West. So, yeah, they pretty much focused on the defensive side of the ball in this draft. And it did come at a price, though, which I'll also talk about in just a bit. So, for the 49ers, the camp battles for at least the defensive side of the ball will be very interesting to see. And it also should be very interesting to see under Robert Saleh, because he's a very passionate guy. And hopefully he'll be able to get the best out of each and every one of these players that are going to show up to camp and, yeah, see who's going to perform the best, who's going to be wanting to make that roster. And especially at the safety spot. I'm really intrigued to see who's going to fill that safety spot, given the news of Malik Mustafa, who's I figured was going to be a key piece at that position. But he unfortunately re-injured the ACL during the first session of OTAs last week. So he injured the ACL that nobody really knew that he injured the season finale against Arizona. And I hope it's he'll be able to come back earlier than expected. Some were saying he won't be ready until mid-season. He'll be ready by week 1, but hopefully he'll be fully healthy and ready to come back when he can. Now, again, the positive is that he'll be ready to play. That's the good news. Obviously, the bad news is that, well, he's injured right now. That's the bad news. But again, the safety position during camp is going to be the most interesting position to watch on defense, because who's going to fill in for Malik Mustafa in the interim? And then another positive for this defense is that front seven. I think the front seven should be at least better on paper right now. We'll see how it is in execution. Nick Bosa finally gets some much needed help with rookies Mikael Williams, Alfred Collins, and CJ West. Warner gets some needed help in linebacker Nick Martin. And hopefully Robert Saleh can get some production out of D. Winters. I believe this is year 2 or 3 out of D. Winters. So hopefully he can finally take that next step and Robert Saleh can unlock his potential. Now, unfortunately, there is the negative side of this offseason, and that comes at the expense of the offense. The offense did not get the same treatment. The offense did not get the same treatment as the defense in both free agency and the draft. And sadly, the main disadvantage, the main recipient of said treatment, the same negative treatment, was the offensive line. The offensive line was once again neglected. It was once again neglected, for the most part at least. It was neglected all offseason long, for the most part. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, Kyle Shanahan continues to blatantly ignore one of the most important positions, one of the most important parts of the football field, which is the offensive line. Like, how could Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch go almost the whole draft? They almost went the whole draft without drafting an actual legit offensive lineman, outside of drafting a guard in the 7th round in Connor Colby. It took them the 7th round. And part of me was frustrated when they didn't get something in the 1st round. And I initially said in my Filthy Casuals guide, when I talked about the Niners, that I wanted heads. I wanted seats to be on fire. And hell, I still want seats to be on fire to a degree. But man, I just don't get it. I don't understand why they don't value protection for Brock Purdy. Like in any quarterback in general. It's like, why do Kyle and John have such a hard-on? Why do they have such a hard-on for wanting to see their quarterbacks get injured because of crappy offensive line play? And, I mean, I get it. Quarterbacks get hit all the time. But when you see Kyle and John continue to neglect the offensive line, and when you have them you'll see them at press conferences wondering, oh, I don't know why they got hurt. Like it just shows you their negligence. It just shows you their negligence of not wanting to invest in the offensive line. You have teams, more than half of the teams in the NFL draft, using their picks on the offensive line on draft weekend in the first 3 rounds. Even teams that didn't have a pressing need for offensive line use their picks on offensive line. And yet, this regime couldn't use a single one on that in the first 3 rounds, let alone the first 4 rounds. Like, I get it. Defense was a need, but you can't bounce that off with an offensive lineman. Really? Now, if Purdy or whichever quarterback gets that's going to get the start this season, they get hurt because of this crappy O-line that has, outside of Trent Williams and Dominic Mooney, you have whoever starts at left guard, and then you have Jake Brendel, and then you have the right tackle that shall not be named because I always forget it. You have this crappy offensive line that still has flaws at those positions. Then the seats of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are only going to continue to get even warmer. They're going to eventually continue to be on fire. They're gonna get so on fire that people are gonna be calling for their heads. They're gonna be calling for their heads to get figuratively cut off. Obviously, I don't want them to get, you know what I mean. You know what I mean? All I'm saying is the 49er faithful better be hoping for prayers. They better be praying that this regime gets at least more upfront help from Brock Purdy. And at least they did sign an offensive lineman. At least they signed a swing tackle that was formerly of the Arizona Cardinals. But can they do more? Can they at least do more to get Brock Purdy more upfront protection? Come on, man. There's got to be at least one more or two more free agent veterans out there for this underperforming, very poor offensive line. So another thing that I want to discuss is the contract extensions that's been ongoing. And once again, has been another point of discussion. Like, this has been going on for how many years now? What, 1, 2, 3, 4 years now? The contract talks for this team. Now, the good news is that the 49ers have already locked down George Kittle. He was one of the players eligible for a contract extension. They've already locked him down. So the Niners finally got an extension done well early before the season started. So, yeah, they got a deal done. It was, I believe, 4 years, $70 million that George Kittle got an extension on. So, they got their Pro Bowl, All-Pro, WrestleMania-bound tight end to a wealthy deal. And I think it's pretty much assures that George Kittle is going to be a Niner for life, which I'm happy about. He's the people's tight end. He's the WWE's tight end. Yeah, the WrestleMania tight end. I'm happy about that. And so should Niners fans as well. Now, as for Brock Purdy and Fred Warner, there's still mixed reports on how those talks are going and whether those talks are actually progressing. Obviously, Brock Purdy is the most prominent one and how much he's going to get paid. And in my opinion, I talked about this in my season recap back in January. He should be paid, at least $50 million or below that, in my opinion. I still think $50 million is still much. But like I said back in January, Kyle and John, they still have the leverage on Purdy because he's on the last year of his rookie deal. And recently they brought in Mac Jones, and for whatever reason they drafted another backup since the draft. So it's now on Purdy and his agent to know their worth. Know their worth or shut their mouths. So, yeah, they eventually got to get this extension done. Hopefully before the end of May at the earliest. So hopefully they get something done sooner rather than later. But the good thing is that all three have shown up to the 49ers' first set of OTAs, and hopefully they'll keep showing up for the rest of the offseason activities. So that's at least the good news. At least they're being team players about it. But continuing on with the bad stuff, and I know some people don't want to hear the bad stuff, but we got to do that here in Very Cold Lasagna. You have to have the good and the bad here on the podcast. The receiver room, it's pretty whack. It's pretty whack if you ask me. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk, he's at least is progressing from his injury, but you don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back. And he may not be ready for the start of the season. And the Niners really didn't do a whole lot to help out Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, other than getting Demarcus Robinson. And we're not too sure yet on how the new draftees, Jordan Watkins of Ole Miss and Junior Bergen of Montana, how they're going to pan out, or let alone make the roster and make an impact. So, yeah, it remains to be seen if either one of those can at least be a temporary replacement until Brandon Ayuk comes back. So, yeah, until then, that receiver room still looks pretty whack. But let's see how preseason pans out for all three of them. Kicking competition still is needed for Jake Moody. They didn't sign a kicker in free agency to compete with them once training camp comes along. I mean, there's still plenty of time, though, for that. They did invite an undrafted kicker in Kenny Almerdaris. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. He's from Louisiana, and he supposedly was one of the best kickers in college football last season. I mean, obviously, that doesn't really translate to the pros. I mean, just go ask Jake Moody himself. Yeah, like, just because you're one of the best kickers in college football doesn't mean you're automatically one of the best kickers in the NFL. So, yeah, just because you're successful in AEW, for example, doesn't mean you'll be successful in WWE. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if the Niners signed a vet like Eddie Pinheiro or Cade York, whatever kicker veteran is out there, to increase some heat on Jake Moody in what could be a kicking competition between Jake Moody and this undrafted guy, if he somehow makes it to compete with Jake Moody. So to wrap this episode up, I want to evaluate, and I mean this in air quotes because this is a casual evaluation of the Niners draft picks, and they mostly used all their draft picks. I believe they lost one in the 5th round because, well, they had an accounting error. Yeah, of all things. They lost a 5th round pick because of an accounting error. But anyway, let's do a little filthy casual evaluation, and I mean that in air quotes, of the Niners draft picks and what they possibly bring to the table. So obviously we start off with our 1st round pick, which was picked at number 11, and that was Georgia edge rusher Mikael Williams. So Williams, the pros that I have for him, he's very physical. Probably the biggest strength of him is he's a strong run defender. He can beat opposing offensive tackles and reach opposing running backs very quickly. He's, like I said, pretty much very aggressive, very physical, and very strong. And as a pass rusher, he's aggressive in shedding blocks to escape offensive linemen. But when it comes to actual pass rushing, sure, he's strong and aggressive, but his actual pass rushing leaves a lot to be desired. But he still does possess really nice athleticism and movement skills that gives him room for improvement. So like I said, when mentioning Mikael Williams, he's a raw edge rusher. When I mean raw, he still is an unfinished product, but he's very young. I believe he's only 21 years old. So there's still plenty of room for improvement for this man. So as long as he develops right, as long as he's able to properly develop under Robert Saleh and maybe Nick Bosa takes him under his wing, I think you can get a very good 1-2 punch under in Mikael. So then we had Texas defensive tackle Alfred Collins. He's pretty bulky. His overall size, length, and strength make him an effective run defender. So exactly what you need in the interior, because the Niners' run defense really sucked last year. He's also an aggressive run defender when it comes to shedding blocks. He has some really good techniques with hand swiping and using arm moves to shed other opposing offensive linemen. His weaknesses pretty much come in, just like Mikael Williams. He's not exactly the best pass rusher outside of using his big long arms. Yeah, he has some pretty lengthy arms that I've seen in his highlight package. Outside of pass deflecting though, and causing a few interceptions, he's not exactly polished as a pass rusher, because, well, a lot of that has to do with his delayed bull rush, which hurts his explosiveness. But I do feel like he will contribute as a run defender. Then you have linebacker Nick Martin from Oklahoma State. So what I like about this guy is that he pretty much will track the ball whoever has it. So he's pretty much like he's like a spy. He's pretty much an aggressive spy, as evident with his sense of urgency. And his over-aggressiveness makes him a pretty good fit for the play style of Robert Saleh and the 49ers, and which is bully ball, pretty much. Unfortunately, he is undersized with a 5'11" and a 200-pound wingspan. So, in other words, he's pretty small. And that size is pretty much one of the lowest of any NFL linebacker out there. So he will need to prove that he can play both run and pass coverage in order to take an even a rotational role away from backups like Jalen Graham or Tatum Batoon. That's currently on the roster. So it'll be interesting camp battle to see as well between those three. So we'll see how it goes. Then you have cornerback Upton Stout from Western Kentucky. Not much is known about this guy, but from what I've seen in the few highlight packages that I saw, he is very small, which is his biggest weakness. And that small size is going to allow bigger receivers to beat him in contested situations. But despite his size, he makes up for it with this feisty quickness and aggressiveness. Especially as a run defender, he will be quick on the ball. He'll be quick at running backs, and he'll try to make a concerted effort to take down the running back. And the other thing is he's a multi-positional player, so he can play in the slot and be an outside corner. So he can pretty much play whichever spot needed in the secondary. I mean, except for safety, obviously. And then we have another defensive tackle from this one from Indiana, and it's CJ West. So we have another run defender here, and this one, the biggest strength to him is that he's very reactive. He's very reactive to the snap. He's very physical. He can stun opposing offensive linemen very quickly and get to the quarterback or get to the running back. He's pretty decent as a pass rusher, pretty much using his hands. So he's very handsy after contact. So that helps him in those situations. The only thing to be concerned about with CJ West is he has very short arms in contrast to Alfred Collins. So he has pretty short arms, and that pretty much limits his ability to shed blocks. So despite being very handsy, yeah, he can't really shed blocks all that much as both a run defender and a pass rusher. And then you have a receiver from Ole Miss, Jordan Watkins. So not much is known about him as well, especially as we talk about these late round picks. So with Jordan Watkins, he's a good route runner that shows off his speediness against corners after the catch, but he's undersized. He's only 5'11", 196 pounds, and he has the athleticism, but is he going to be able to out-physical opposing corners that are bigger than him? That remains to be seen, especially when you have someone like second-year receiver Jacob Counting. He's going to be competing for that other receiver spot. Then you have running back from Oregon, Jordan James, and this is actually an interesting pick that I believe will make the roster and will be competing for one of the backup roles. So with Jordan James, he's good at identifying new running lanes on the fly and changing course quick with jump cut runs, which I think is going to be a very good trait of his and something that Kyle Shanahan will really like, especially with how well his vision is to find those tight running lanes when his offensive line is failing him. But the thing is, when it comes to him in passing situations, being a receiving back, he is very inconsistent. He can sometimes catch the ball, but sometimes he can't, especially as evident with how much he dropped the ball literally in his last 2 collegiate season. I believe he had a 14% drop rate as I researched. So he's also not exactly the most athletic running back. So he may have good burst, but it is actual athletic ability. Now, I'm not saying I'm athletic, but I'm just, taking it for what it is. He's only above average. So he's not like Christian McCaffrey athletic, not even Jordan Mason athletic, but I mean, I'm just taking it for what it is. Okay. I mean, again, I'm not athletic. Then you have Kansas City safety Marquez Single. Again, not a single. Again, not much is known about him, but I think the Niners may have gotten someone that is pretty underrated, and especially to help out offset the injury to Malik Mustafa in the interim, because this safety pretty much possesses some pretty nice upside with his speed and versatility, and can be a multi-positional player when needed, because he previously played corner in his collegiate career, and he can also compete with challenge struggling safety Jair Brown. Jair Brown has not exactly been helpful to the 49ers in the last 2 years, and he has a willingness to go downhill, and that's also something that has been a Niners weakness for the last season or two. So he can go downhill and track the ball in both the passing and run defense. So that's something the Niners could seriously need. But the thing is, when it comes to his weaknesses, he did miss on a decent number of his tackles in the last 2 seasons. So that's something to be a little wary of as he transitions to the pros. And if he doesn't somehow beat Jair Brown but still makes the roster, he may start out on special teams. So I do still think that Marquez Single is an interesting watch during training camp and the preseason. So hopefully he'll be able to make the roster. But then we get to the most baffling pick for the Niners, and that's quarterback Curtis Rook of Indiana. Yeah, that name alone is why this is a baffling pick. No, I'm just kidding. No, let's get to why the Niners drafted him. So when you look at what this kid brings to the table, well, the football IQ. He actually possesses a really good football IQ. He reads coverages well. He nicely handles full field reads, so he can read defenses. But the thing is, with him, he can read defenses well, coverages well, when things go his way. When his offensive line holds up, when he has no pressure. So yeah, he's basically a quarterback that goes by the numbers. He's a pure pocket passer, and that's pretty much that. So, but at least he throws it. He throws well. He finds his throwing lanes well. He's tall, but again, being a pure pocket passer, when things break down, he cracks under pressure, and yeah, he can't make those off script plays when the pocket collapses. So, yeah, that pretty much makes him a backup quarterback, if anything, and whether he actually is able to outbeat a quarterback like Mac Jones or even Tanner Mordecai remains to be seen. Then we get to the only offensive lineman that the Niners ridiculously drafted in this draft, and that's guard Connor Colby. So what he brings to the table when it comes to strengths is he brings plenty of starting experience, including 13 starts inside Iowa's run-heavy scheme. So he is a really good run blocker from what it seems, that possesses good quickness to cover his target completely. And he has a tall, lean, and well-rounded build with a very good athletic ability. So from what I've seen so far when it comes to his highlights is that he can at least, protect the running back well and open up some really nice running lanes. But the thing is, when it comes to pass protection, it's very sketchy. It's very sketchy, and it still needs development. Then we get to our last pick of the Niners draft, and that's from Montana receiver Junior Bergen. Not much is known about the kid, but when it comes to his biggest strengths is that he's a very good punt returner. He's had 8 punt return touchdowns during his collegiate career, but other than that, he is undersized as well. Being drafted at 5'9", and that's pretty much a ceiling. Pretty much being part of the special teams unit. Now, is that enough to make the roster? I mean, that remains to be seen. But I don't know about in the actual offense itself. But we'll see in training camp. So overall, with this Niners team, I mean, they had a long offseason to recollect themselves, and they had since January to fix what went wrong in the 2024 season, where they were injury riddled, they were underperforming from a Super Bowl where they could have finished the story right before Cody Rhodes and a bunch of other people in 2024. And so far, when you look at this 2025 offseason, the results, in my opinion, it's been a mixed bag. And it's been a very mixed bag. At least defensively, it seems like it's going to be a little bit better, in my opinion, especially in the defensive front. The front seven seems like it's going to be better, but on paper, it has to translate to execution on the field. But offensively, it's been a fail. I'm sorry. The offense, it's the signings and the draft, it's been a fail. Because in essence, with how much Jed York was tweeting during that draft, Kyle is still not capable of putting together, of surrounding Brock Purdy with better upfront protection, stronger upfront protection, whether it's in free agency or the draft. Like, Kyle Shanahan gonna go out of his way to make an attempt to sign one of the most coveted free agent centers out there in Drew Dalman. Like, they couldn't make an effort to do that. They couldn't make an effort to at least trade up or go out and get Josh Simmons. Like, go back into the first round to go and get Josh Simmons when all the Chiefs had to do was swap first round picks with the Eagles to get Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Like, why couldn't they do that? And they have the gall. They have the gall to say, "Oh, there's nothing left. There's nothing left. There wasn't anything left for us in the first round, the second round, the third round." Yet there are plenty of things left. There were plenty of options left by the time they were able to pick. And it was relatively early in the second and third round that they could have picked. Yet they didn't want to take a chance on whatever was available. Yeah, neither Kyle Shanahan nor John Lynch are pretty accountable. They can't hold themselves accountable like how Triple H books Rhea Ripley, the character at least. Like, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch at this point, at least right now, when it comes to putting together an offensive line, are like Rhea Ripley. They're like Rhea Ripley. They can't hold themselves accountable of trying to protect Brock Purdy, of trying to put it together an offensive line. But nonetheless, these offseason activities like mini camp and train camp, I believe, regardless of how I feel about how much of a fail of the offseason when it comes to putting together the offense, but at least defensively, it's a little bit better. I think it's going to paint a better picture on how the 49ers productivity in what at least should have felt like a retooling offseason, is going to paint a better picture on how far they can actually go in the upcoming regular season. And it'll even paint a bigger picture on, well, how they're going to do in the preseason. So it'll be interesting to see how things will go for my 49ers heading into even training camp and into the preseason, and then finally into the regular season. But we'll have a better idea of how these Niners will be, especially when we get into talking about them again in our season previews for not just the 49ers, but all the teams coming up whenever that will be. So, yeah, just my thoughts and, my little rant on a few things on what the Niners didn't do in this offseason so far. So let me know what you guys thought on how the Niners are doing. Let me know what the big positives and, well, what you didn't like about what the Niners are doing in this offseason so far. Yeah, let's have a conversation about it in the comments below on YouTube, or slide into the DMs on my socials at Very Cold Lasagna, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram. Let's start up the conversation, and yeah, let me know what you like or haven't liked about this 49ers offseason so far. And yeah, we're just closing in. We're 3 months away from the 49ers preseason, and then 4 months. And sooner than later, you'll know it's the regular season. It comes in the blink of an eye, pal. But still a long ways to go. Still a long wait. But again, it comes by relatively quick. But that is going to do it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I've been your host, Dylan Lasagna. This is episode number 269 of this icy yet spicy podcast for your filthy casual takes on the world of sports, for you casual fans out there like you and me. And yeah, it's good to talk about my Niners again. So yeah, it's going to be a little while until we talk about them again, unless there's something major that comes up. But yeah, it's going to be a little while until we talk about them again. But until the next one, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge. And until I see you, when I see you in the next episode, peace out.